All right, I'm joined by my colleague, Alex Cyr. Alex, moments ago, New York City Marathon decided to throw a giant curveball in our day and in the lives of the top entrants in this edition of the race by announcing that not only is Eliud Kipchoge coming to the Big Apple to race in New York for the first time, but why not? Let's throw Sifan Hassan into the mix as well. So we will break down the implications of this massive announcement, and we'll also talk about what each of their chances are at maybe winning the New York City Marathon might be. But the very first thing I want to ask you is just, I mean, literally this happened like 15 minutes ago, and we just jumped into the studio here to record. Level of surprise on a scale of 0 to 10 that both of these athletes are running New York.
Oh, like 9. But I think you contributed to that because you sent me like the WTF text where I was like, I thought I missed yesterday's news or something because you just went casually. Want to talk about Kipper and Hassan doing the New York City Marathon? I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, I thought I missed a massive piece of news, but turns out I just hadn't been on Instagram for the first like 5 minutes that it was announced. That's huge. I didn't think that this would happen. I mean, it kind of makes sense because when you think of their race in Sydney, all right, that's already a few weeks back. They get about 9 weeks of turnaround and preparation before the New York City Marathon. So for professional athletes like that, I guess it makes sense. I just didn't think that they would pull it off. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we should say, for those who've been living under a rock, these two athletes that are, I mean, Kipchoge for sure, greatest marathon runner of all time, full stop. And he was missing the New York City Marathon as the only marathon major that he has not run. He ran the inaugural Sydney marathon as a world marathon major. Yeah, just like less than 2 weeks ago. It was on August 31st. And also, of course, Sifan Hassan ran that race and won the women's race. And she is ascending right now as like truly a legend on the track, and then now also as a marathon runner as well. We'll look a little bit further into her career and context in a second here. But I got to say, yeah, I would say the Kipchoge dynamic of this is maybe for me about an 8.5 on 10 in terms of surprise. Because when you think about it for a half second, it's like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. After the Sydney Marathon, we did our Instant Reaction podcast with our colleague Jesse. And Jesse and I, we talked a little bit about this for a second. It was kind of like, okay, what's next for the Kipper, right? And then the next logical step for him to kind of conclude this grand project of the World Marathon Majors was, of course, to do the only one he hadn't done, which is New York. It left me thinking, like, is this guy going to wait a year to do this? So in the back of my mind, I did think, it's not out of the question that Kipchoge, if he's healthy and he's feeling good and he's motivated, that he would jump into New York. Sifan Hassan, on the other hand, that's a 10 on 10, like jaw-dropping, WTF indeed, like incredible. And I would say like sneaky more exciting than Kipchoge coming. We can get into that when we talk about how this alters both elite fields right now. Oh man, where do we go from here? Like, this is just going to it's just changing the entire dimension of this entire marathon of the New York City, of the fall, really.
Yeah. Where do we go from here? Can I start by just applauding Eliud Kipchoge?
Yeah.
That's what hit me when I saw it, because we've been speculating about this for more than a year now. And it used to be controversial when we said this on the podcast. And I think now it's kind of common knowledge that Kipchoge is in the twilight of his career and he's not the best living marathoner right now. And so when that happens to really high caliber athletes, they kind of have one choice to make. They can go one of two ways. Either one, and I think this is the common one, you start to step away from the limelight as an athlete and you fall into more of a, depending on the sport, say a coaching role or an ambassador type role. Like in another world, Kipchoge would have come to do the New York City Marathon to raise a bunch of money for charity and run a 3.5 hour marathon. So a jog for him. And that's kind of that. And he's finished his majors. But he went the other way. And this is the other road that great athletes sometimes take, and I really applaud this road. They keep on competing after their prime. Tom Brady has done so. He wasn't in his prime near the end, and Caitlin Tossey's not here to defend him. Tiger Woods competed far after his prime. Roger Federer competed far after his prime. LeBron is still playing, and he has had better seasons before. What these athletes seem to have in common is that they've emerged as craftspeople. They like the sport. They keep playing because they love the game. It seems to be less about ego. You can make a case that LeBron has an ego, but not big enough to stop him from playing. And I think Kipchoge falls in that category. And for that, it just makes me like him more. There was a really real possibility that he would have retired this year after realizing, well, hey, maybe I'm not winning any major podiums anymore. And so that's it for me. I love that he's not doing that.
Yeah, we should say that Sydney, I think by all accounts, even for him, was a bit of a disappointment. He finished 9th. It was one of the less sparkling finishes in his marathon career. It was his 23rd marathon in his career, and he finished in 2:08:31. He was in it, just as with London in the spring. He was in it all the way until about 20 miles, and then he fell off the lead pack. I think those comps are excellent, Alex. I think that, yeah, LeBron obviously comes to mind. They are peers in many regards. They're both Nike athletes. They're both pinnacle athletes for Nike. They're both more or less the same age, almost exactly. They might be the same, like exactly the same age. Kipchoge's turning 41 on November 5th, just a couple of days after he runs the New York City Marathon. So to think of that in context, that's pretty incredible. I agree with you. To me, I mean, I've always been a Kipchoge fan. It's hard not to like the guy, but to me, this also illustrates just how much he is a process-based athlete. And what I mean by this is he's often talked about how he enjoys going through the rigors of training. He likes the process of the marathon. He likes the 16, 18, 20 week build. He likes being in the camp, training with the athletes, with his fellow athletes, younger athletes, mentoring. He likes the rigor. He likes the workouts. He likes the long runs, which is super relatable. Like if you enjoy the process, not every runner enjoys the process, but it's not just about the outcome for him. Funny situation. Just this morning, I was prepping for an interview that I'm going to do with the American marathon running great and author Pete Fitzinger, who wrote the book Advanced Marathoning, which is now, I believe, in its 4th edition. We're talking to him about this new edition.
Great name drop.
Talking with him later on today. And there are 2 modules in the new edition of the book. One is on Eliud Kipchoge, and the other is on Sifan Hassan. And I was reading both of them just this morning. And the Kipchoge one speaks about his passion for the process. And the Sifan Hassan module talks about how she loves to approach running in a project-based and problem-solving oriented perspective, from that sort of headspace. So for her, and literally this was in this book I'm reading this morning, where she said that she approached the Paris Marathon last year and the Paris Olympics last year as this fun idea and challenge, where she was like, I wonder if I can do all these events and run the marathon 36 hours after I get off the track. I wanted to see if I can do this. Let's see if this can happen.
Oh my God. That's so different from the voice that goes on in your mind if you're coming at it from an ego place, right?
Yeah.
Because even for myself, not an elite runner like they are, my mentality, and I feel like this is probably common, would be, oh my God, I don't want to go make a fool out of myself. I'll be so tired. Why would I expose myself in front of all these people and no one's watching me? Wow. Cool. Okay, cool.
Okay, so let's get into that. Let's break down the men's side now that we've added Eliud Kipchoge to the start list, and then we'll talk about the women's elite field in a moment. Kipchoge here, at least on paper, and this is unfair perhaps to his fellow competitors, but Kipchoge on paper now, I'm like literally looking at the press release from the New York Roadrunners who run the New York City Marathon. He is now the obvious top of the list in terms of they rank you by personal best when they send out these elite start lists. So he obviously has that 2:01:09 from a few years ago when that was at the time the world record. Of course, that world record has since been eclipsed and it's now 2 hours and 35 seconds. But technically speaking, the Kipper's got the best seed time going in. He's going to be going up against Benson Kipruto, fellow countryman, and I believe training partner, if I'm not mistaken, at least in the same overall group. Deresa Galeta of Ethiopia. He's a 2:02 runner. Evans Jabet, who has won Boston and New York in the past. He's 2:03 flat. Alexander Mutiso Munyao, who has won London. He is really coming on strong in the last couple of years. He's run 2:03:11. And Abdi Nagier, who is the reigning champion, is coming back. He represents the Netherlands. And there's a slew of other very accomplished, decent runners that have run in the 2:04, 2:05 range as well. Where does Kipchoge, where does he fit in all of this? What happens?
I think a realistic goal for the Kipper is to finish on the lower side. And by that, I mean lower numbers of the top 10. You know, a top 5 finish to me would be a good A+ goal if I'm Eliud Kipchoge. And I think a top 10 finish is somewhat expected. That's what I think. But I don't even know if placing matters so much. I think the corners of the internet that hate on Eliud Kipchoge are small and a little bit nasty. And the rhetoric coming from there, a few let's run threads here and there, was that he was dodging competition. That's why he's going down under to do Sydney. It's the weakest of all majors this fall. Right. And I think just his participation in the New York City Marathon completely destroys that notion. He's lining up against one of the best men's fields ever assembled, and maybe the best one that you could find this fall. So even if he's out of the top 10, I wouldn't even say that that's a failure. But I'd say if I'm Kipchoge, I'm looking to get into that top 10.
Yeah, we should say that the course record, because New York is a challenging course, hilly, grindy, lots of turns, loads and loads of turns, which takes the speed off. It is on the slower side when it comes to the majors. Kipchoge, unfortunately, has kind of now developed a reputation of being a runner that has not done well in the hillier championship style races. Championship style meaning no pacers. It's not a race that's designed for a world record, because a world record won't be run there based on the comportment of the course. He struggled in Boston a couple of years ago when he ran there. And he also, of course, DNF'd at the Paris Olympic Marathon, which was a kind of hilly course last summer as well. I think Kipchoge, if he finishes let's say certainly top 5, but if he finishes top 10 and he runs evenly and well and doesn't fall off too badly, I think this will do really well for his already sparkling, incredible legacy. But there is that little kind of like asterisk of like, he struggled in these more quote unquote challenging situations and challenging courses. It'd be great to see him perform really well and really evenly in New York. The course record's 2:04:58, which by today's standard is actually a little kind of slow. It was set a couple of years ago by Tamara Tola. So we'll see how close everyone gets to that. It will depend on a lot of factors, including the weather. But I think, finishing well for Kipchoge and in that kind of top 10 would be extraordinary. And he's going to bring the Kipchoge aura to town. Yeah, before we hit record, you and I were discussing about how this changes for us from a media standpoint, because we're all going to cover this event. Our whole team's going to be there. Mm-hmm. This changes the news, the press conference. This changes what Nike's doing with activations. He's going to be spotted. He is a massive celebrity, and he brings a whole, like the Kipchogean glow to an event like this. So it's going to be huge. Yeah. The women's side. let's talk about the women's side here. In a way, the women's side is more exciting now that we've got Sifan Hassan. I think it affects Sifan Hassan's addition affects the elite field on the women's side more so, I hate to say it, than Kipchoge on the men's side.
Totally.
Fair? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And it changes the storyline. There was already a very neat narrative around this year's women's marathon, and that was the Lokedi, Sharon Lokedi meets Helen Obiri, Lokedi v. Obiri version like 12 or whatever. They've become maybe the two best rivals, might be the best rivalry in running in general, up there with Ingebrigtsen v. Kerr in the men's 1500 right now. And had the race been centered around just these two athletes and defending champ Sheila Chepkarui, there would have been a bunch for us media folk to chew on and fans to enjoy. But now that you throw in Hassan in the mix, I don't know if that ends up just bolstering the rivalry between the two, where it's Lokedi v. Obiri v. Hassan in a sprint finish, or if the story gets to be a lot less about these two athletes and Hassan just steals the show. Because we talked about this before. In women's marathoning right now, it seems that there are two camps inside of the best athletes in the world. There are the racers, and then there are the time trialers. The time trialers being the Tigges Asefas, the Sifan Hassans, who've routinely thrown down really fast times and seek fast courses. Whereas you have your racers, the Helen Obiris and the Sharon Lokedis, whose personal bests are 7-8 minutes slower, but who know how to run a good race and how to win a race. And so you could look at it in two ways. Maybe the hills of New York are difficult on Hassan and she goes out too fast, she blows up, and the more experienced athletes on the New York City course, Lokedi and Obiri, swallow her up and win and beat her. Or Hassan just goes out super hard, doesn't give Lokedi or Obiri a fighting chance because they've never run at 2:14 or 2:15, runs at that pace, and then takes the race. And I hate to say it, if that were to happen, I feel like it would be a less compelling storyline than seeing two athletes sprint until the end.
Yeah, we should say that Sifan Hassan now enters this field, peak of her powers. She's run 2:13.44, which makes her third fastest all time, or second fastest all time if you discount the current world record, which we won't get into right now. But this also means that she is going to throw a monkey wrench in what was, as you said, otherwise a really compelling elite field on the women's side in the first place with the last three winners. We should not overlook Sheila Chepkarui of Kenya as well, who won last year. So I think this is going to be super exciting and also adds to that rivalry dynamic because many of these athletes have faced each other just last year in Paris. Sifan Hassan is really good at seemingly everything. She was excellent on that monstrously hilly and challenging and hot Paris Olympic marathon course. So she is no stranger to a gutsy, grindy race. And she's also someone that has no problem seemingly yo-yoing in an event, in a championship style event. She fell off the lead pack in Paris last year and then fought back to win that race in jaw-dropping fashion. So she's going to add a huge element of unpredictability and potentially chaos and also potentially speed as well. The women's course record in New York is very old. I believe it is the oldest of course records of all the marathon majors. I'm just going off the top of my head here. Yeah, it is 2:22:31 from
Crazy.
2003.
Wow.
A 22-year-old record. I feel like it's going to fall this year. I feel like it's going down.
It has to. It has to. A funny side note that I'm like looking towards and I'm going to keep in mind while watching the New York City Marathon is that I've been looking ever since you texted me about this. I tried to find evidence of someone who's won two major marathons in one season. Not a year, but a season. So like two major spring marathons or two major fall marathons. I couldn't find anybody. I don't think they keep these specific stats, but I didn't find anyone, and I don't think it has happened. So if someone knows of someone, let us know. But I don't think it's happened, and I think Hassan has an incredible chance to do it. And who else but her? I like when you describe that she approaches things as projects, because she doesn't approach things like others do. She does set her own projects. So need I remind you of her Olympic performances? So in 2020, she won Olympic medals in 3 events, like racing, I think like 8 times, like heats and finals over the span of barely a week. So the 1500, the 5K, and the 10K. And then again in Paris, right? The 5,000, 10,000, and marathon. She won medals in all 3 of them, including winning the marathon. So if there's someone who can accomplish this, call it feat of longevity, it is Sifan Hassan. She's kind of built for this in a way. And also, I think we're quietly witnessing, perhaps, the growth of the best women's marathoner in the world. This is very premature to say it, but her track record for majors is insane. She's already won 3. She's got a win in London. She won Chicago. Just earlier this year, a few weeks ago, she won Sydney. This could be her 4th major victory. She's barely started marathoning.
And another really interesting detail on that is that all 3 of those victories were debuts at those races. So she is good at showing up without having experienced the course and doing extremely well.
Wow.
And she's also, we should say, she's also run Tokyo as well. She didn't have as good a time in Tokyo, but I gotta say, I do like her willingness to fail. I think that that's an important attribute in a champion. And I also think it's smart for her to be, she seems to be kind of shadowing Kipchoge in terms of decision-making here, like quite literally this fall, shadowing Kipchoge in decision-making, or at least they're making these decisions in tandem, both Nike athletes, both part of the NN running team as well. That's the group that represents them, their agency. Very good decision-making. Final thought for you before we'll provide our predictions on how each of these athletes are going to do. We've sort of showed our hand to a degree, but we'll formalize them in a second here. One thing that came to mind with me, Alex, is in this announcement, New York must have just cut a massive check. It's like you walk into a car dealership and you're like, maybe you're looking for like a really nice SUV, and then you end up buying like 2 supercars instead and like remortgaging all of your assets to get them. I mean, how much money did this cost New York to get both of these athletes? I'd love to know. Like $200,000 each in appearance fees, maybe?
I think it's more like going to a car dealership, buying a bunch of SUVs, going home, going back 2 weeks later, realizing you have another $400,000 to spend, and then buy the sports cars because they've already spent a bunch of money on this field, I presume. It's not like the fields were weak. So I don't know. I don't know. There were some reports of Kipchoge making upwards of $200,000 for race appearances in the past. I think that might have been London, just up the top of my head. It was London. So I can't see why New York City couldn't match that. Obviously, this is a huge payday for both of them. And because I mean, also, you need to mobilize these athletes. We're talking about them as if they're superhuman, and in ways they are. But the reality is they have to pivot from one huge marathon build and spend 8-9 weeks regrouping, taking a small break, going back into race mode. Like, yes, they're professional athletes, but that's not an easy thing to do for anyone. So there had to be some type of incentive for them to double back and come and do New York.
We have seen a few instances of elite level athletes, right off the top of my head, CJ Albertson, of course, who loves to run many marathons.
He's an anomaly.
He's a little bit of a different animal, and then Rory Linkletter, who I also spoke with this week. Mm-hmm. We'll have a podcast dropping about him with that interview forthcoming probably this coming weekend. So keep an eye out for that.
So I'm
And he did,
decidedly the third most interesting person at very best that you spoke with this week.
yes.
Yeah.
And Rory did Boston this year, and then he did Ottawa about, what was that? That's about 6 weeks afterwards. And he
Yeah.
felt, I asked him about that, and he said he felt really strong doing Ottawa. He felt really motivated. He felt like he had enough gas in the tank. He was able to pivot and get enough training in to feel confidence to run another marathon in the same cycle. Sifan Hassan has shown herself to be extremely resilient runner. So my other thought was just more generally about the landscape of marathons, and especially these top marathons in the world. I did wonder to myself after Sydney if Hassan in particular, or any of the other top runners in the elite field, would take a crack at a race like Valencia, because as we know, Valencia previously has offered huge sums of money for anyone who wants to take a shot at a world record or running extremely fast at their race. And they are one of the few races in the world that are not a world marathon major and are on the outside looking in, but still are looking and aggressively spending on building a very prestigious elite race. And that race sits in December, so it would have given a nice gap between Sydney. And I'm surprised to see that New York swooped in and grabbed both of these athletes. I guess there's little interest from Kipchoge because he's on a path to try to finish the World Marathon Majors. Of course, Valencia is not one. So that led me to think this. I think some of these races outside of the majors now that are looking in on the majors that know they'll never be a major, at least not in the next several years for geopolitical and location-based reasons, like Valencia or Paris, they're going to be challenged to attract great runners, because I think Sifan Hassan she is recognizing that to build your legacy, it's wise to stick to running these majors and to build out that story around these majors, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I was always of the mind that as the majors schedule gets bigger and denser with adding Sydney and perhaps eventually Cape Town and Shanghai and who knows what else, it would dilute the product. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does the opposite. Maybe it just gives more opportunity to athletes to, to do a few of the majors per year. And maybe that ends up being the be all end all for athletes, because the limiting factor of majors in the past has been that they're not year round. What happens if you get an injury and you find yourself really fit in December, for example? Well, you do Valencia. But what if in the near future there are 9 majors on the schedule, and other than perhaps the dead of summer on this hemisphere and the other, they happen year round?
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so before we shut this thing down, bold predictions. How do you think Kipchoge is going to do? You alluded to it earlier, but how's he going to place? What's his time going to be? What's the afterglow going to be?
I think he'll run better than in Sydney. I don't think that for him it's a total reset. I think New York will be building upon Sydney. I feel as though on top of him wanting to complete the majors, there might be a bit of unfinished business in his mind after having a pretty mediocre performance for him in Sydney. And so I think he'll be at least as fast or a little bit faster. I could see him dropping something like a 2:07. And if he does that, that'll probably place him between 6th and 9th. I'll say 2:07, 7th place. We're going with lucky sevens.
I'm cheering for the Kipper. He is, I think this is maybe the coolest thing he's done in a while. It's actually very relatable. The guy's just bucket listing. He's just like, I want to do this race. I want to finish all the majors. I want to do it now. He's obviously feeling pretty good, or at least healthy enough in his recovery after Sydney that he's going to go for it. And I like all that positive energy. And I think he finishes 8th. I think he runs 2:07:30, let's say. Sifan Hassan, this is a trickier one, because if she's feeling good, she is the person to beat in this race all of a sudden. What's your prediction?
Any other athlete, I would factor in the Sydney performance and the difficult turnaround, but she has shown that she can bounce back from a world-class race in as little as a week and be super effective. I mean, she did that Olympic 10,000, came back, won the marathon. And so I don't even think that Sydney applies for her. I think she will be in top shape on that start line, and a top shape Sifan Hassan beats a top shape Lokedi, Obiri, Chepkarui, pretty much anybody in the world. I think she's going to win.
I think she's going to win as well. And it's kind of wild to say that because she ran a marathon like less than a couple of weeks ago. So I think she will mirror her performance in Sydney. I think they're comparable courses in many respects, New York and Sydney. They are both hilly. They are both challenging. She is facing a deeper field in New York, which I think she will actually relish that experience. She ran 2:18:22 in Sydney. I think she is going to run 2:18:21 in New York, set a course record and win the race, but it's going to be a tight one. I think it's going to come down to her, Lokedi, and Obiri battling it out in the last miles into Central Park. And it's going to be an absolute barn burner and a thriller to watch. And I'm so excited to watch it. All right, Alex, our whole team's going to be in New York. All of us, whole crew, do all kinds of content around it. This just made our week in New York even more exciting and crazy. And we'll have to cook up all kinds of neat ideas around these added storylines that have been injected into this already great race. And I'm excited to talk about it. And I'm sure if there are any other crazy things that the New York Roadrunners throw at us in the next few weeks, we will do a video on that as well. But until then, thanks very much, Alex.
All right. Till next time.